All right. Welcome back to the podcast, back to Theory and Theology. It seems people have been tuning in a lot lately. I appreciate it. I'm seeing the listening ratings going up. That's always nice to see. And please excuse me, I might have a bit of a cough, but I'm kind of on a roll. I kind of took a few hits off of a pipe of some indica, so I think that contributed to me starting to cough a little bit. My sinuses don't really do too well with anything, to be honest. But anyways, enough about all that. So today's topic, we're gonna touch on Göbekli Tepe. I might be saying this incorrectly. I don't really fluently speak any other languages than English, and all the people who I'm listening to seem to say the word that way. I don't know any Turkish languages, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it. But we're going to be focusing on this megalithic structure site. So there's a lot that comes up. Some of it, originally, of course, it came from, just lately I've been looking into a lot of content about Egypt. And, the more and more people talk about ancient sites, the more I start seeing stuff about pyramids, and the more I start coming across stuff about pyramids. Gobekli Tepe kept popping up not every time, but often. So I'm going to get into some of the interesting things that are being spoken about regarding this site. So let's talk a little bit about what is known about what it is. So it seems near 1994, there was a farmer in Turkey who was plowing his field and came across this kind of rock that had like a kind of I don't know what the shape is called. The closest thing I can think of is it reminds me of Tetris. So kind of like a single step, or two steps. So say if it looked like you were going up one step and then up to a second step, it looked like maybe two steps like that. But of course, because these are megaliths, monoliths, they're thinner, usually a staircase is wide, or even steps, they're usually wide. Like this would be like, if you imagine like maybe two steps about the width of your foot, and that's about what it looked like on one side, and then there was like a flat top, and then the other side just was flat. It didn't have any steps to it. So one side had like what looked like two steps, the other side had no steps. The top was flat, so it basically looked like a little two-step thin narrow platform. But that's the top of the structure that was sticking up from where this farmer was plowing. So they refer to these types of pillars as monoliths or megaliths, so I hear a lot of different information. Some people say that the megaliths are 20 feet tall. I've heard people say that they're 20 tons. Some of them weighed as much as potentially 20 tons. But they say it's the world's largest megalithic site that's been found. And, not only that, but it basically just challenges a lot of what archaeologists and historians teach about, the history of humankind. When we start looking at these migrational patterns and like who got where, when, and how they were there and why they were there. So a lot of questions start coming up. They state that, I guess maybe I should talk about this first, that they state that the site is at least 12,000 years old. At least 12,000 years old. Some people say, near 13,000 years old. And I mean, it's hard for me to even think of how old that is. I mean, if you think about, at least in the U.S., most of the modern history or maybe even not modern, but even when we go back to ancient times, usually they talk about, approximately 2020 something years ago, when Jesus was on the earth. And if you compare now, how people live now to how people lived then, we have a range, right? When you look at things, there's a range even between now and 2000 some odd years ago of how people lived, what was going on, how people thought, how people, how cultures were. If you look at the most modern technological cultures and societies that we have today, and then compare them to how things looked in Jesus' time, I mean, whoa, there's so much different stuff that, there's some stuff, there's definitely similarities, but definitely differences as well. And, one thing that I do notice too, that someone else mentioned, is that, there are still people in society that live similar to how people lived 2,000 years ago. There are still societies like that. And I'm not here to judge them or anything. I think it's cool. I think it's awesome. So it's we're all coexisting on this earth at the same time. There's some people who, even though there's modern technology, I struggle using the word advanced, but I know that word comes up, so I might say it a little bit too, but I don't really know, what I think about that term. It feels a bit judgy, and it feels a bit like I would be implying that people who use modern technologies are is a more advanced method compared to ancient technologies or ancient methods. And I'll get into that a little bit at the end, but I don't truly believe that. I don't truly believe that on every level. On the surface, it might look that way. Yeah, we have Wi-Fi and all this really cool stuff, and Bluetooth, and electric cars and Tesla and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of flaws, in modern technological cities, politically and all these types of things. There's some methods of thinking and definitely poverty rates and all these types of things that it's yeah, okay, we can call it advanced, but then there's this other part that's that doesn't sound very advanced, that people sleep on the sidewalk and, aren't taken care of, and that mental illness is on the rise, and, some people, some advanced, if you want to put that in quotes or whatever, some advanced societies have, a lot of like obesity rates and health problems and all these other things. So it's like, in a way, yeah, technologically advanced as far as like devices and, cars and transportation and that kind of thing. But sometimes it's like the ways of thinking are kind of backwards. There's not a lot of equality. There's a lot of like weird, like political, strange, like manipulation and, greedy, money hungry people that are just like destroying the earth and all this other kind. Not that people that have money or are rich are destroying the earth all the time, but I'm thinking like major corporations that couldn't care less, that are going through like in the Amazon or other places on earth and trying to like destroy like tribal areas just to like take the benefits of the resources for whatever their company is. They can get cheap resources and sell it, or even exploitation of laborers, sweatshops in other countries and stuff. Like, I wouldn't call that kind of stuff advanced. And so that's why I kind of struggle with saying like, okay, technologically advanced or whatever. It makes it seem like, okay, better than when people were not even having like electricity and used oil lamps, so I don't think it's necessarily better in every way. And I feel like maybe I'm looking into it too much, but I feel like it's not better in every single way. And so I kind of do struggle with, the terminology of technological advancement. But I understand, and I use that, and I do say that too, but I just want to make it clear that I don't believe that it's always 100% better. There are benefits and costs to any kind of way of living. I don't think most ways you can really compare, now to 2,000 years ago, now to 6,000 years ago, now to 12,000 years ago. I don't know how to compare all that. So it's just kind of a thought that's been coming up. Because I feel like we're kind of taught to think that way. We're kind of taught to think, okay, we're going to, anything that's newer is better than what was older. I don't think I really believe that. But anyways, okay. And I'm adding one more note. Okay, so we'll get back to that kind of thing at the end, but, I don't want people to think that I'm meaning something that I'm not meaning when I'm using certain terminology. It's just I don't know how else to say it, So, yeah. So they say that the site is at least 12,000 years old. They state that the first city was not Göbekli Tepe, but the first city, I believe, like in Damascus or something, is about 11,000 years old. And they say that how Göbekli Tepe is at least 12,000 years old. That is 2 times the age of Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. So that's old, right? And the complication is that, the belief that we're taught, at least in throughout history, is that, humans kind of went from these really kind of primitive lifestyles of not really knowing how to do a lot of stuff, and then slowly learned more and developed into doing more technologically advanced types of things. therefore their lives became better, and they became better, and they were better. So as things go on over the years, over decades, over centuries, potentially the idea is that humans are getting better and more evolved compared to way back 12,000 years ago. It would be assumed that those people wouldn't be as advanced as we are now in many ways, and especially when it comes to construction of things that we don't even know how to do, or like the pyramids. We still haven't figured that out. There's plenty of theories out there, and nobody really knows for sure. And we'll get into that kind of stuff in another episode. But yeah, to think that there's a site twice as old as this famous Stonehenge and Egyptian pyramids. I mean, we're still struggling with Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids and how they got those built. And now, they're finding things that are over 12,000 years old that they don't even know who made it. And so it's super interesting. And this wasn't that long ago, 1994, all right? So this area had been there. This guy has this property. I believe they say Gobekli Tepe means Potbelly Hill. And that area, I mean, it has a name. People knew of it, but I guess maybe the knowledge had been lost, or nobody really knew what it was. And so apparently this guy had it as part of his property, and he was plowing and found stuff. And in 1994, Klaus Schmidt we'll get into that, but he came in and started excavating the site around that time period. And that's when they found out that it was more than that little like step looking thing that had first been found when the farmer was plowing. They found more of them, and they're deeper down into the earth of this hill area. They state regarding this site, so it's basically, if you look at pictures, you can find images of it, pictures of the parts that are the most excavated at this current time. They state, a lot of times they've used laser technology. They haven't completely excavated the site, but oftentimes they've used laser technology, or I don't know if it's laser. It's some type of technology where they can tell what's going on beneath the surface of the earth without having to excavate every single area. So they can tell that there's these different layers. And Göbekli Tepe alone, if they're just looking at this first, or most of the first, or part of the first, I don't know exactly what they're including in this, but they say that it would have taken 50 men 1 week to move one of the monolithic pillars from the limestone quarry site. And this site, I believe, was really far away. Let me see if I wrote down any information about how far. I don't think I know how far. So basically, and I wrote a note here that I'm not sure if they meant when they said 50 men moving one pillar for 1 week from the limestone quarry. I don't know if they meant that that's 3 weeks straight without sleep, like just the calculation. You know what I mean? 1 week. Sorry, not 3 weeks. 50 men 1 week. Does that mean just however many hours there are in 1 week? Or does that mean how many hours, if you include like a normal sleep-wake schedule where, say, you sleep, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours a night, and you still have to like eat and get food and do other stuff. You can't just be straight up like doing this for a week. But I was thinking if they say 50 men would take 1 week for one pillar, then if you double that, then it would be 100 men would be half a week, right? For one pillar. And then so it takes 50 men 1 week for one pillar. So basically, if you do the math, if you add more people, this could have gotten done. But it sounds like the limestone quarry wasn't anywhere nearby, and these pillars are massive and heavy. They're massive and heavy. They have like animal carvings. Some of them have these animal carvings protruding out and everything. It says that it would take over 300 hours to carve each animal. 300 hours, I mean, trying to do math in my head. That's like 12 days. So, I mean, it doesn't sound excessive. Like, it's a lot, but it's like, I mean, ask some of us how long we spend playing video games, you know? It's like, people spend a lot of time doing stuff, you know? And, you know, I don't know. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who watch hundreds of hours of television, you know, and things like that. So it's like, yeah, it would be maybe super complex, but the thing is, because it's such a long time ago, they didn't believe that this was possible such a long time ago. It's not so much that it's possible, right? Because they're not saying this is impossible. Like, it's amazing, it's great, it's old. They're not looking at it like they do with the pyramids, how they're like, wow, like, how the heck did they do this? Like, we don't even know. Like, it's just with the time period being so long ago, and with there not really being any proof of who did it, like which culture of people did this. And there's other like strange things that just make it even more mysterious, that we'll get into. But it's not necessarily that it's impossible, right? Because if you're like, okay, it would take 50 men a week to move one, it's like, it's not like there were like hundreds of thousands of these monoliths. Like, there's an amount that you can count, at least with the ones that are sticking out so far. And so it wouldn't be impossible if you had like 50 to 200 people to like get something like this done. But, you know, and, you know, 300 hours for one of the animals is not like there were like 8 trillion carvings and then they're like, how did they carve all of these? You know, like, it's a relatively small region. It's not like it's as big as like the city of Los Angeles or something. Like, it's not like that huge, but it's more so the issue is that the time period and what was taught historically about the people of those time periods, you know, thinking even Stonehenge, the pyramids in Egypt, like 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, and we don't even know about that. And now you take something double the amount of time in history, and it's like, how did they make this? You know, considering that they would have been assumed to not even be as advanced as the people who made Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids. They would have been considered to be considerably less advanced in building and things like that. And even like if we think today, so if you think Jesus time, 2,000 something years ago, compare our architecture and things now to then, and then take 2,000 years ago around Jesus time, go back 6,000-7,000 years ago, and you have Stonehenge and You have Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids in Egypt and a lot of other sites. And then go back double that amount of time, go back about 12 to 13,000 years ago, and there's Gobekli Tepe. And then if you think even like the city of Damascus about 11,000 years ago and whatnot, if you think about these types of things, it's like it challenges just the linear, I guess that's what it is, the linear idea of how humans were able to construct either buildings or anything like megaliths or any type of site that would have taken a large amount of people or a lot of manual labor and movement of things that like we don't know how they moved them. Like there's no proof of how it was moved or where it was moved. Like I believe they did find a limestone quarry, but it sounds like it was really far away. And because these are like a lot of these megaliths are like they're a single pillar. It's not like it's multiple pieces creating a pillar. Like they're relatively thin, like not like super thin, like a sheet of paper thin, but like they're thin, like but still heavy. And so they would have had to move them. And okay, so let me see, looking at these notes. So basically, so Göbekli Tepe has these, it's technically like 3 circle looking structures. Like kind of what it looks like is 3 round wall type of structures with these T-shaped megalithic pillars sticking up that have carvings on them. Some of them have carvings, some of them don't. And then it has what do you call it? They mentioned something about like a triangle, like the way they're set up is that the 3 circular looking structures make like this type of a triangle. They say that each of those 3 circles, one of them would take 1 year to complete. And another one of so basically the main issue is that it was not believed that hunter-gatherers could come together in such large, gigantic numbers of people and in addition be able to build a site that requires so much human involvement with there out being like human remains, right? And then there's all these questions like, what the heck is this site? Why is it there? Why did nobody even know about it? I mean, like before 1994 or so, or whatever, around 1994-ish, nobody really knew what it was. This site, I guess the hill itself had a name. This guy owns this land. He didn't even know what was under there. And so it was left or forgotten, or we don't know. And I believe I heard somewhere too that it was purposely buried. Somebody or some group purposely buried this site, which is why it was under that mound, under that hill. And he was plowing in that area. For what reason? I don't know. I mean, it was his farm. Like, so you would think if people knew that it was like a very important site or something like that, this like historical, how would he even have the land? You know what I mean? It's like, it wasn't, in Turkey, it wasn't seen as like an important historical site until they found these megaliths. And then I think they contacted some German authorities. That's how Klaus Schmidt got involved in the excavation portion of things. So And it's interesting, like, I never learned about this in school. Like, I never learned about it when I was younger. I mean, I was in school. I graduated high school in 2002, and so this was still relatively new information back then, I guess, in the early 2000s. So, I mean, we only, I guess, really known about it for like 8 or so years. I don't ever remember hearing about it, though. So, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that I've been hearing about it more now than ever. Like, I've heard about it more in 2023. I don't think I've ever even heard of the site before. And when I saw pictures, I don't think I'd ever really seen pictures of the site before either. So I don't really know. Maybe it's the algorithm. I don't know what's up, but I always blame the algorithm, right? But yeah, that's not the only. I mean, we're gonna keep going. There's still more mysterious stuff, but that's just a very introductory confusion, that is coming up. Is that it wasn't believed that any of this was possible because we've always been taught that there's this like linear method to like human development and everything. But then when we start looking, it's like, is it really linear? Because it's like the Great Pyramids are like amazing, and that wasn't, I mean, that was like 7,000 years ago, and, meaning that during, Jesus' time, that would have still existed. It's not like the pyramids were like covered and hidden, but it's interesting too. Like, I don't think the pyramids are mentioned in the Bible. I mean, there's quite a bit about Egypt, at least in Exodus and some other places. I believe there were some census time periods, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think Jesus had to go to Egypt, right? Or was that somewhere else that he had to go? I don't know. I don't even want to say things that are like completely wrong. I don't know why in my head there was some kind of census or something. Let me see. Let me see. Look that up real quick. I don't know. Oh, so yeah, Jesus went to Egypt to escape from Herod when he was slaughtering the baby boys in Bethlehem. So he left. He was taken to Egypt. So yeah, I did think that there was something about Jesus in Egypt. There wasn't like a whole lot of information, but it's like, I mean, Egypt was a place that, even in the New Testament was known about. I mean, it's not like it was like a small little dinky place. Like, it was a major, it would be like if somebody didn't know, about the U.S. existing in today's time, like that's not very common that people don't know. It's like, yeah, like one of the major world centers and everything. So, all right, I'm getting way off topic with this Egypt stuff, but let's bring it back. So, okay, so basically, history teaches that hunter-gatherer... Is that where I am? History teaches that hunter-gatherer cultures didn't have structures, that they didn't have agriculture, that they didn't have, like, communities, cities, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, maybe communities, like small groups, like small hunter-gatherer groups, not like massive like cities where people were staying in one spot all the time forever, never any kind of like migrational patterns. I believe hunter-gatherers kind of have to move around. Like, I don't think they always, like, every single group always stays in the same exact ancestral place. I think they have to go with like, if there's winter and summer or whatever, like, they have to go with where they can find food and shelter. They can't just, I don't know, it kind of depends on the country and stuff, too, I guess. Like, I don't really know. But, not necessarily nomadic, but, you know, they would have some aspect of that, probably. And so that's usually the belief, is that back then the people weren't supposed to be doing stuff like this, basically. And so somewhere along the lines, you know, we didn't really get that right with that linear thinking of, like, you know, everything that comes next is better than what was before. And so, yeah. There are a lot of questions, you know, like, what was the motive? What were the motives of the people for making this site? They don't even know who made the site. People are asking, are they survivors of a lost civilization? Who were these people? The carvings, I believe the carvings are of, like, animals and different types of things, but I don't think it's, like, actual written script. And if there is written script, I don't know if this is one of those sites where they said that they don't know what it says because they can't read the script, or I could be wrong about this completely. There might not be any written script, but carved into any areas, like, but there's no written script. There's, as far as I know, but if there is, it doesn't seem like it says anything about who the people are. Either it's something that can't be read or understood, or it doesn't say anything that's significant to, like, who these people are that made this. So they mentioned that there's evidence of use of tools, right? So there were tools found at the site. They found butchered wild animal bones at the site. But the other weird part is that there are no human remains, no domesticated plants, and it's not fully excavated yet. And so they were saying that those things are kind of strange, right? Because some people say there's kind of, like, maybe, like, two thoughts of, like, what this site is. Like, some people believe it was some type of ritualistic type of site, maybe something for, like a burial or funeral type thing, or religious type thing, or, you know, ceremonial type of place where maybe people would go and gather or something, or it was built, like, for a ceremonial reason. And then there are other beliefs that it is it's not ceremonial, and that potentially people could have lived in it, like it would have been a dwelling area. But there's no evidence of any of that. Like, there's no, at least so far, they haven't found, like, buried bodies. They haven't found any, like, like, the reason why I think they mentioned the plants, no domesticated plants or human remains, is that, you know, it means that, like, maybe not everybody was there and then just suddenly got killed. You know, it doesn't appear that people were living at this site. It didn't appear to be, like, a hub where people went and, like, I don't know, shopped or whatever. Like, there was nothing, like, specific, there's nothing in the remains that shows like specifically what it is. Like the carvings don't show what it is. People don't know who the heck built this place. The modern day people who know of the area didn't even know that it was there. It looks like it was purposely buried. That's already another weird thing. It's like it was there, and then the people who, somebody decided to bury it. Either the people themselves or some people after them, I don't know. But the people themselves or the people after them maybe decided to bury the site, maybe for preservation, maybe to hide it. Who knows what that was about either, but it was preserved enough because it's been under earth for so long. It seems like it was a protective measure, but also it's like, okay, well, is all the knowledge lost then? Like, what, happens? There's so much. And these notes are compiled from like watching multiple videos and hearing some lectures and things. Like I don't have all the questions. I don't have all the answers. I don't have any answers. I have probably more questions than answers personally. But, basically there's a lot that we don't know, and we'll keep going. So basically, that might be a bit of a clue if they're butchered wild animal bones. I don't know about what people were doing 12,000, 13,000 years ago, but just from what I know about some ancient cultures and ancient traditions, even if with modern people, it's not uncommon for there to be sacrifices. Even today, in a lot of cultures, when there's like a birthday or a circumcision or a wedding or a birth or something, there are reasons why certain cultures and their traditions might butcher a goat or butcher a certain animal, or even for like ceremonial or religious reasons, sacrificing animals. And even biblically you see that a lot. There's sacrificial, they're sacrificing all the time. They're sacrificing animals often. That's a part of the lifestyle in that time period, in that area, with those groups of people. And I don't know, like maybe it's a place where people ate. I don't know why someone would go through that much effort to build something that looked like so extravagant just for people to come and eat there. But maybe they ate. Maybe it was like a safe haven for people to, if they were starving and they could come eat. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. But for there to be butchered wild animal bones, that means that animals were being killed there for some reason or another. There aren't that many reasons why animals get killed. They get killed for research. They get killed for eating. They get killed for rituals. I don't know that many other reasons why animals get butchered, especially if it's in larger quantities, where they're not finding that much stuff there, but they're finding tools, they're finding animal bones, and they're not finding any other type of stuff that would show that like humans would be living there. So, it's one thing if people are eating somewhere, but it's like, well, if they're not living where they're eating, I don't even know if it's eating, it's like, are they eating? Are they, I don't know. But that's kind of what comes to my mind. I'm like, I maybe can't fully think outside of the box on this one, but, that's what comes to my mind. I think it was when they talked about Dr. Lee Clare. I don't know. Okay, so they talked about something that was confusing, and other people might need to look this up, but they talked about this concept of these like 3 layers. So there's the layers with these like megaliths. There's these other layers, and then they mentioned, that when they started trying to build a tent type of structure on top of this so that people could come look at it, visit it, see the place. They started constructing this kind of like canopy type thing, and so they had to do some form of digging along the outsides of this site to have this canopy put up. And in that process, they said that in the bedrock, they found grain processing areas, they found rainwater collection areas, they found something that resembled maybe housing areas. But again, to have housing, grain processing, rainwater collection, why were there no human remains there? I mean, maybe this is a culture that didn't bury people at that site, maybe they took them and buried them somewhere else. I really don't know what the site was for. It seems like it was meant for permanent use if it would have taken all that effort to build it. It doesn't seem like it would be the easiest of sites to just like build and leave. But what they were doing there, I don't know. I mean, my speculation really kind of goes to, it had something to do with food. I mean, if you see animal bones, you see areas for grain processing, maybe they were making, like maybe it was a site, like a factory type site to like produce, bread, water, meat, and people would come and get bread, water, and meat there. I don't know, but if there's also housing areas, I mean, who lived there? Maybe the people who were in charge of the animal, whatever was happening with the butchering of the animals, the grain processing, the rainwater collection. Maybe it was a center of worship, and then they had those areas where they would have to like produce a lot of food. Like, if you would think that a lot of people would be building the site, if it really did take 50, 100, 150, 200 people per se, and if that's only men, that means that there would likely be women and children as well. And so that would be like over that amount of people, and maybe families, people, tribes would come visit that area for a center of worship. Maybe they would lodge there, and maybe it was a culture where they would collect the bones of the dead people if anyone were to die, and they wouldn't be buried there. Like, there are cultures that don't leave their dead body bones at the site where it dies. It's like, even if you think of if I think of modern American Western culture, usually if someone dies, you don't just bury them like right in the spot. Like, you usually take them to a spot to get buried. So it would make sense sometimes, like, if you find an area that looks like an interesting structure of some sort, and then there's nobody actually buried in it, because I think humans don't tend to just like bury people just wherever they bury them. Like, they tend to have designated places, or even some cultures carry the bones of their dead or things like that. I don't know. Like, there could have been a lot of different options of things that could have happened, but so Dr. Lee Clare, I believe, he was the one that believed that the place was filled with people, like potentially maybe people living there. Others, I don't know if they really believe that, but because of these other types of things, they kind of believe that. But it is interesting, if there's no domesticated plants, nothing was being grown at the site. So it sounds like things were getting produced there or brought there, and grain was potentially produced, animals were butchered, and there was water, potentially, and some housing, potentially. But they do mention that thing about the 3 layers that I don't really understand what that was. Like, they say that there's like 3 layers of different categories of things. They mention that there's a portion called Pillar 43, a stone that's called the Vulture Stone. They state that this is potentially a timestamp for a comet that struck the Earth 13,000 years ago. This was something that Martin Sweatman said, and people argue against that. I mean, people argue against all of it because there's not like any clear proof. There's not like a written document or something that's like, these people did this, and then there's all this proof of like them living there and like remains of who it was, and you know, the exact culture of who the people were, and you can connect it to who did it and like the history of how they got there and what they were doing. Like, there's none of that. There's just these few pieces of evidence that haven't been found, you know, even before 1994 by anyone modern that knew that it even existed. So this is a lot of quite new information. And they state that there are about 12 or so, I think they said a dozen, or maybe it was multiple dozen, but it sounded like they said a dozen other sites with similar types of T-shaped pillars that have been excavated in Turkey. And so it's not uncommon for these like T-shaped pillar sites to be found. And I don't know if they say what those other sites were, but it sounds like this was like part of some kind of culture or some known method of creating some kind of structure in an area, that this was something that came up around that area. They state, okay, so when it comes to, you know, I think we mentioned, you know, Damascus, one of the oldest cities. They say Jericho is one of the oldest cities, from 12,000 years old, and it's still inhabited. I think they say that's the oldest city that's still inhabited since 12,000 years ago, and has been inhabited since that point. So there's not really too much of like mysteries there, because it's like, okay, like they can trace who's been there. I believe they can trace who's been there most of the time. Jericho doesn't really have anything to do with this, but it's just one of those things when they start talking about like cities and different regions and stuff. And so I guess part of my kind of concluding thoughts kind of on my end is that like, why is it that we're taught that people of the ancient world were less intelligent to some extent? Like, that is kind of like assumed, right? That they were less intelligent because they hadn't figured out how to do things more similarly to how we do things now with a lot of stuff. So, you know, I do consume a lot of content about different cultures, obviously, and I do like watching a lot about, you know, ancient cultures and even modern day people who live like in ancient traditional societies and things like that. I've watched plenty of types of documentaries about, you know, hunter-gatherer tribes that still exist, still use like their old methods, old traditions, old technologies, and you know, they have a lot of skills. They have tons of skills, tons of advanced knowledge that those of us who live in like Los Angeles, for example, or whatever, if we're born and raised out here, you know, there's stuff that we can't do in our technologically updated cities. Like, we don't know how to do certain things. Like, if you threw me in the middle of a forest or a jungle or whatever, I wouldn't know what to do other than what I've maybe read or seen on occasion, and I probably would end up eating the wrong thing or dying of thirst or hunger. Like, I don't think I could fend for myself. I don't really have like nature skills like that. They say that so all these like updated cities, we don't practice or have knowledge of the stuff that a lot of these other people in these hunter-gatherer tribes do. And we're still coexisting on Earth at the same time that they are, and we're just advanced in our own ways. We learn how to survive in our own environments. I mean, if you threw me into an environment with a group of people who could teach me how to do stuff, I could learn how to do it, and vice versa. If you throw any of those guys into like a modern technological city, and they could figure out how to do everything quickly. Like, we're humans, we adapt, we learn how to do things. But it doesn't really mean that people are necessarily smarter or better. It's just a different way of living. That's the way I see it anyways. Some examples, that I've seen kind of more recently, but kind of know about, like some tribes in Papua New Guinea, some tribes in like Tanzania. There's all kinds of tribes all over. And I think about like some tribes that use like shamanistic practices, plant medicines, like different types of psychedelics, things like combo, sapo, all types of, like psilocybin, all different, ayahuasca, all types of things that, in my opinion, that's advanced medicine. It's advanced medicinal technology that, and maybe this is a controversial opinion, but in my opinion, that's advanced knowledge of medicine. A lot of these medicines people, use, they take them, they have a benefit from it, and it doesn't work like our common, over-the-counter or prescribed types of, modern medicine. I would say that that's more advanced than what we use, what we're legally allowed to often use, oftentimes, a lot of the medicines, I'm not knocking it if people use like antidepressants or, benzos or whatever. Like, people do what they got to do. It's their body, their mind, but I've had plenty of experience with plant medicines, and I would say that they're definitely beneficial. If you, have a method for yourself. And of course, it's not like 100% for everybody. There's still risk involved, but also with modern medicine, there's risk involved. So, I prefer it, honestly. But to each their own. But that's just kind of an opinion that I have when it comes to thinking about like ancient ideas and modern ideas. I really don't think overall that, just because something's modern, it's better. There's a lot of people that revert back to some ancient ways of doing things and find benefits. I believe the hippies did that. They started doing things differently and found a lot of benefits to living a lifestyle that was different from how they were raised to live and what they were raised to believe. And they were challenging a lot of things, and the whole like counterculture, and I like that kind of thing. I think it's, in my opinion, it's kind of good to be knowledgeable of other things, choose kind of what works for yourself, if it's the healthiest version of what you can do. And it doesn't really mean that it's different. It might be different than others, but it doesn't make you worse or less than. There's plenty of stuff that I don't do that a lot of modern people do. Like, most people know I'm pretty against television. Most people know I'm pretty against a lot of things. And yeah, I'm considered a little odd and weird by most of my friends, like with the things that I do or don't do, and things I do or don't consume. either into my body or into my mind. Like, I just have my own way of living, and a lot of it does have some kind of ancient relevance to it, but also it's like it works for me. It works for me better than what I was taught was going to work for me. So, yeah. And one of the other points, I guess, one of the last types of points in these notes, as I'm scrolling to see if I've forgotten anything, well, maybe two last points. One was that I wasn't sure if this site, one question I had was if the site had any kind of astronomical or astrological type of relevance. Like when, for example, like Stonehenge, the pyramids, things like that, there are places where, you know, they have some kind of significance with like constellations or like the solstices, equinox, whatever, and you know, they have relevance in that way. I wasn't sure if Göbekli Tepe had anything like that. I'm looking it up really quick. I can't really astronomy. Okay, astronomy. I don't know what I'm trying to spell here. And so I don't know, like it says people suggest that the site was aligned with the night sky, and particularly the star Sirius. They say that local people worshipped the star like other cultures in the region did thousands of years later, potentially. And some people are asking if it was the first astronomical observatory. I mean, that's a cool idea. Let me see. I'm trying to see what they say, if they say that they found anything. Two celestial points. One suggests aligned with the night sky, particularly the star Sirius, because of the people worshiping Sirius, and then claims that the carving record a comet impact that hit the Earth at the end of the Ice Age. So potentially they built the site to commemorate that. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know these people. But yeah, the reasons for building, we don't know. And then there's also this last kind of note that I was kind of thinking about, like, you know, if we were to compare to today, you know, we often build modern structures, stadiums, theme parks, entertainment areas, like places that can be abandoned. They're not used for dwellings. Sometimes they're in the middle of nowhere significant. Like, I know this area in San Diego, in Chula Vista, there's this water park. I don't even know if it's still open, but I don't know if it's still there. I don't know, but there's an outdoor amphitheater down there, and right near it there is or was a water park. And all the times I'd been to that amphitheater, I'd never really seen anybody at the water park. I'd never heard of anybody going or anything. I mean, that's not really like a very important example, but I'm just thinking like there are a lot of sites, you know, that get abandoned, that were built for some reason or another, entertainment, sports, whatever it may be. Like you see some places in like, you know, Russia or whatever, and it's like this place was there and now nobody uses it and nobody lives here anymore and that kind of thing. And who knows what people would think about, you know, a sports arena or something. Like, it doesn't look like this is like a site for sports. But, you know, just because nobody was like living in it, or it doesn't seem like anyone was living in it, they're like, well, what was it, you know? But also, again, you know, they haven't fully excavated the whole site. They haven't gone down all the way to get to the bottom of every single part. And like they're mentioning, there's these other layers, and I'm wondering if they're gonna find something related to housing or dwelling, or I don't know, like maybe they just built it to worship there, to commemorate things or whatever. But it sounds like a lot of effort if it wasn't being used for anything that was of a very important significance. And it's hard to know who would make it and why there's no record of which people made it, why it seems like it was buried on purpose. Like, there's all these like weird questions that are just like, what the heck, you know? So I don't know, I'm still interested in this site. I'd love to see it one day. There's a lot of stuff I'd love to see someday, but yeah, I just wonder, you know. But check out the information about it. Don't always take my word for exactly what I'm going by what I hear, what I read, what I've seen around and stuff, and just trying to like compile the information. It's a very informal, you know, research that's mostly through the internet, so I don't have access to any knowledge that anybody else, you know, wouldn't have access to. Like, if you want to look up this stuff and, you know, just make sure it's accurate, because sometimes I write my notes wrong, and sometimes I say things wrong, and sometimes I don't really understand what's going on either. So yeah, I don't want to say wrong things, but I try to the best of my ability to kind of get it as accurate as I can. But I hope this was of interest, and thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for more.